Tantor Audio presents Discovery of the Saiph by P. Corcoran. Narrated by Eric Michael Summerer. Chapter 1. Doorway to the Galaxy. Senate of the Terran Republic, Geneva, Earth. Senator Gillian Ray, representing the Borland habitats on Titan, listened to the gray-haired scientist who was concluding his testimony before the Senate's Science and Technology Committee.
The ion drive is our most advanced light-speed technology, the scientist said. It is capable of speeds of up to 1/4 the speed of light, which means it will reach the closest stars within 25 years, a vast improvement on previous attempts. The probe can gather images and data from the star's planetary systems and send those images and data back to Earth by radio. My peers and I agree that this is our best hope of identifying other worlds suitable for human habitation, thus ensuring our continued survival. Thank you.
As the scientist took his seat, Gillian looked around at her fellow senators. Many were nodding their heads in approval. She waited a beat, and then another, and then rose from her seat and got the attention of the president. "Does Senator Ray wish to be recognized?" Bartholomew McMullen asked.
"I do, Mr. President."
"Very well. You have 5 minutes." Gillian took a breath and began.
"Mr. President, and fellow senators, I need not remind you of the consequences of fully autonomous machines that have insufficient programming and little or no human override. Many of you know that I was fortunate to have survived an incident involving one such machine."
Gillian paused to let that sink in. As most of her colleagues knew, she had been one of the few survivors of the Borland blasts, a disaster triggered by a prototype of a fully autonomous mining machine undergoing trials on Titan. The machine mistook a fuel line for a mineral vein and used a laser cutter on it. The resulting chain of explosions and rapid decompression of living quarters killed 104 men, women, and children. Gillian heard murmurs of recognition and saw nods from many of her peers.
"Who knows what these probes will discover when they reach their destinations?" she continued. "Who knows how they will react to their findings in the face of unknown variables, which may be beyond their programming? Such autonomy may result in the loss of vital data, missed opportunities, or worse, the loss of life."
Gillian paused again. She saw more nods, but also some puzzled faces. Behind her, she heard whispers.
"I propose that we send out manned probes. I understand that this increases development difficulty 100-fold. It will require the expansion of our deep space environment technology program, and it will delay the probe deployments. Nevertheless, the benefits of having a human on the spot to make critical decisions will be worth the added time and expense. I hope my colleagues will agree that the risks to our people are too great to ignore. Thank you."
Bartholomew McMullen, the 23rd President of the Terran Republic, stood to address the Senate. "Thank you, Senator Ray. Senators, we are all aware of Senator Ray's personal and professional experience in this field. She is a devoted member of the Science and Technology Committee, where she has put her engineering degrees to good use, and I know she speaks with knowledge and expertise in this field." The president paused and glanced around the chamber before continuing. "I call for a vote on Senator Ray's motion that deployment of the unmanned probes suggested by our learned senior scientists be delayed at least until the feasibility and practicalities of sending a human crew are investigated." The hollow cube in front of Bartholomew flashed as the senators' votes were recorded and counted. A few minutes later, a bell signaled the end of the voting. Bartholomew studied his screen before rising to announce the results. "Senator Ray's motion is carried." Unbeknown to the President and the Senate, Gillian Ray, the former engineer from Titan, had just ensured the continued existence of the human race. Hazlitt Research Station, Asteroid Belt. Dr. Jeff Moore was having another bad day. He had decided that his state-of-the-art computer enjoyed driving him mad, and he was seconds away from reducing it to a heap of rubble when an incoming call tone sounded. Jeff turned away from the offending machine and answered the call, immediately regretting it when the smirking face of Valerie Hayes, director of the Vega Star Probe team, appeared.
That bad computer laughing at you again, Jeff? What can I do for you, Valerie? I was going to offer you breakfast in the staff canteen. The thought of breakfast in the staff canteen just made me lose my appetite. How about a cup of coffee instead? What's the occasion? Jeff asked. One of my engineers, Danny Dunlewy, pulled an all-nighter studying the data from the last improved ion engine test, and he's come up with a few anomalies the computer seems to have disregarded. The improved ion engine was the reason Jeff had been having a spate of bad days. He had theorized that a field of gravity waves projected in front of a steadily accelerating spacecraft would act like the bow wave of a pre-war ocean-going ship and allow greater speed and less resistance. It was a great theory, but it seemed to work only at limited velocities. Whenever the test probes accelerated to 2/3 the speed of light, they exploded. At least he assumed they exploded. The last anyone saw of them was a flash of light, and then they were gone, obliterated into particles too small to be picked up by optical or electrical equipment. Or so he surmised. Adding to his frustration, the cryogenics team at Caulfield Research Station in New South Wales had made rapid advances in techniques to ensure the safety of the Vega probe's human crews. Meanwhile, his efforts to reduce the probe's travel time to Vega had stalled. Is it real coffee? Jeff asked. As real as the recycled air you're breathing, Valerie said. See you in 5. Jeff left his office and took the lift 2 floors up to Valerie's office. He wondered what Danny Dunlewy had found. Perhaps a way to track the larger pieces of his exploded drive. 20 minutes and a second cup of coffee later, Jeff Moore felt as if his world had turned upside down. The data on the holocube in front of him seemed to prove the impossible. Yet there it was. Evidence of faster-than-light-speed travel, a way to fulfill man's quest to travel to the stars. Jeff looked from the screen to Valerie. Where's Danny? He's outside. Would you please get him? Valerie frowned. Look, Jeff, I hope he hasn't led you on a wild goose chase. I know he hasn't been here long, but he does show a lot of... Ask him to go to conference room 1 and set it up to present his data to the heads of departments, will you? Oh. Okay, sure. Jeff stood up. I'm off to the communications room. I need to make a few calls to Earth. Office of the Chairman of the Science and Technology Committee. Canberra, Earth. Gillian Ray looked out through the glass wall of her office, which towered 160 floors above the sprawling city of Canberra. Humanity had worked hard to reclaim the nearly destroyed Earth after the wars. Australia had escaped the worst of it and recovered more quickly than Europe or North America. As a result, it had served as the capital and base of the fledgling Terran Republic until Geneva became habitable again. But the Science and Technology Bureau had sunk its roots deep in Canberra, and when the rest of the apparatus of government moved to Europe a decade earlier, Sci-Tech stayed behind. Gillian had come to appreciate Canberra as a second home, so different from her original home on Titan, and now that she had been promoted to chair of the Science and Technology Committee, she felt even more at home. Australia provided another advantage, one that Gillian had just begun to appreciate. With the President and the rest of the Senate tucked up in their beds half a world away, she would have an extra few hours to get a grip on what the scientist and engineer perched on the couch in her office were trying to explain to her. Gillian turned from the view of Canberra and faced Jeff Moore and Valerie Hayes. Jeff looked even younger than his 18 years as he sat alongside Valerie in one of the comfortable chairs.
Valerie was chosen as the director of the Vega star probe team, not only for her exceptional mind, but for her political savvy. Both proved to be invaluable assets when you push for, and get, authority from those in the corridors of power to employ young, fertile minds, straight from university, rather than choosing scientists and engineers with more experience. When Jillian had received the urgent request for a face-to-face meeting, she had immediately queried the necessity for the 5-day inter-system shuttle trip by Valerie and Jeff, instead of the usual holocube communications. But Valerie had refused any explanation and insisted on the in-person meeting. Now Jillian knew why.
"Explain this to me again in simple terms, please. I'm only a humble politician."
That wasn't entirely true, but her double first in spatial engineering from Cambridge hadn't quite prepared her to understand completely what Danny Dunlewy had discovered. Valerie took a deep breath and began.
"As you know, Senator, we at Haslet Station are trying to develop an improved ion drive for the Vega star probe mission. Since Vega is more than 25 light-years from Earth, our current best estimate is 38 years traveling time, minimum. Accounting for the time required to survey the system and radio the data to Earth, it would be some 66 years before we heard back from the Vega mission."
Jeff continued.
"The effort expended to get our probe there as near the speed of light would save at least 13 years. Well worth it, we all thought. And so, for the past 5 years, we," as he indicated Valerie, "have been out in the asteroid belt building and testing the best engine ideas that humankind can think up. But we had reached some kind of wall, a hurdle we couldn't clear. We have been unsuccessful at getting beyond 2/3 the speed of light before our probes all exploded. Or so we thought."
Jeff took a breath.
"Our practical engineers put a failsafe on the engines. If, for whatever reason, the engine test beds lose continuous communication with Haslet Base for 2 seconds or more, a cutoff switch is engaged. The engine is powered down and they begin transmitting a recovery beacon. We had, as it turns out, wrongly assumed that the previous 4 test engines had been destroyed. Thus the computer was told to ignore any transmission on their recovery beacon frequency. Dunlewy was analyzing the data from the 5th test engine before it too was destroyed when he noticed an anomaly. Remember, the computer had been told to ignore, not delete, the recovery beacons from the destroyed test beds. And Danny found beacons from 3 of the 5 probes. They hadn't been destroyed at all." "But why was their signal not detected before?" "Because it's taken the first signal 2.5 years to get back to us."
"Hang on. Are you saying that our test engines are all in one piece, somewhere out there?" Jillian gave Jeff an incredulous look.
"No, Senator. So far, we've only identified the beacons from engines 2 and 3,
Valerie interjected.
"If engines 4 and 5 have survived, then we would have expected to hear from engine 4 in another year, and 5 7 months after that."
Jillian took her seat and looked across the low coffee table at Jeff as Valerie continued.
"All telemetry received via the beacons indicates that the engine shut down at the planned 2 seconds after the lost contact marker. But if the signal took 2.5 years to reach us traveling at,
Jillian tried to drag the figure for the speed of light up from memory.
290,792,458 meters per second.
Jeff added helpfully.
"Thank you, Dr. Moore. So you're telling me that your engines are sitting 2.5 light years from here, and covered that distance in 2 seconds?"
"Those are the facts as we read them, Senator," answered Jeff with a nervous laugh.
"Our engines are halfway to Proxima Centauri, and if we can figure out what we did right, we could have the manned Vega star probe to Vega in under 17 seconds.
Jillian sat stunned for a few moments, then looked squarely at Jeff and Valerie.
"But how? Short answer, please. I may have to explain this to the public."
Jeff looked at Valerie.
"Would you like to demonstrate?"
"Okay," said Valerie, moving into tutorial mode. I need a piece of paper, she said, looking around the ultra-modern office. Senator Ray rummaged in a nearby drawer and pulled out a battered little diary, promptly ripping out a blank sheet and handing it to Valerie. Sometimes it is useful to keep some old tech to hand, she smiled. Valerie continued with her demo, and looking down, she scribbled on the page. A good way to imagine this is to look at this piece of paper. You will see I have marked one end A and the other B. Valerie looked up and placed the paper on the coffee table in front of her. Senator Ray nodded in acknowledgement. Now imagine an ant crawling across the paper from A to B. If you leave the paper flat on the table, that might take a little while. Now, Valerie picked up the paper and began to fold it while she narrated. If I pick up the paper and fold it so that A and B are right next to each other, just so, she demonstrated this to Jillian. Imagine the ant moving from A to B. Of course, Dr. Hayes. Jillian nodded her head, slowly as realization dawned. Fold space theory. Exactly, Senator, Valerie continued. Travel time is exponentially reduced. Essentially, this is what Dr. Moore's gravity drive has done. Completely by chance, it has given us the means to explore the galaxy in our lifetime and at our leisure. This may change things slightly, said Jillian wryly. Now my next question. How soon can we have a practicable vessel ready? Jeff eagerly looked at Valerie and back to Jillian before replying. Well, with the ability to travel for all intents and purposes instantly, I would think that the current research at Caulfield could be scaled back. Give us their environment researchers and engineers, and we could probably produce a test bed within a year. We would be ready for a full-scale launch within 3. Make plans, doctors. I think you will get everything you might ever need. And good luck. Jillian smiled and stood. She held out her hand. The 2 doctors, taking this as their cue, also stood before shaking the senator's hand. They made their way out of the senator's office. As they left, Jillian placed a call to the president's private residence. The last Jeff and Valerie heard was Senator Ray's charming, playful voice saying to a presidential aide, Well, wake him up gently, then. But wake him up. Chapter 2. First Flight. TDF Marco Polo, Deimos Dry Docks. TDF Marco Polo gracefully released the mooring clamps that secured it to the dry docks orbiting Deimos. The Terran Republic's first interstellar manned ship lit off its reaction drive and slowly pulled away, heading for the freedom of open space. Its captain, David Catney, contemplated the past 5 years. Jeff Moore had thought it would take 3 years to produce a ship ready to go to Vega, but that proved to be a little optimistic. Figuring how to build the automated recovery probes which made it halfway to Proxima Centauri to recover the original engine test beds had taken 18 months alone. Analyzing their data fully and beginning to design the Marco Polo had taken a further 2 years, all the while sending out more and more unmanned probes, ensuring that the jump to such phenomenal speed wouldn't turn the crew into paste on the rear bulkhead. But as Valerie Hayes had pointed out, if my precious computer circuits can survive the jump into fold space and back to normal space, so can you. Yeah, that fills me with confidence, thought David. Or perhaps not. But all the same, here he was, along with his bijou crew. A carefully selected crew, as each had displayed excellence in their respective fields. David took time out to consider his command team. Executive Officer, commonly shortened to XO, Lieutenant Commander Roger Cromie, and Chief Engineer Susan Harper. They had become friends over the past 6 months of training on the Marco Polo and had come to trust each other's judgment implicitly. Also on the bridge were 2 civilian scientists, Dr. Walter Kernahan and Dr. Amanda Allenby, physicist and xenobiologist respectively. Although they too had been training alongside the command team, they had both remained a bit of mystery to David. There was no questioning their knowledge and expertise, but often science got in the way of real life, and neither had really engaged with the rest of the crew as human beings, albeit there was mutual respect. Friendship was out of the question. 5 years, David continued to muse. 5 years. The best minds humanity had to offer, and a bucket load of cash. And here, at last, mankind was about to make his first tentative steps into the unknown. "All ahead 1/3, Chief." "All ahead 1/3, aye," responded Susan. And with that, the Marco Polo's reaction drive pressed them back in their seats. The promised gravity sump, an off-spin of the gravity drive that would take them into fold space, was not yet as efficient at negating acceleration as had been hoped for, but research and development was well underway. Only time would tell. Mixed emotions welled, excitement, trepidation, even a touch of fear of the unknown. David pushed these aside, conscious he and his crew had an important mission to complete. He was also conscious if he was feeling this way, his crew would be too. "Everyone, it has been a pleasure training and working with you on the build-up to this mission. I regard you all as experts in your fields and colleagues, some of whom have become my friends. Others I have come to regard with the utmost respect." He glanced at the doctors as they sat by their control panels. "To each and every one, I thank you for your hard work and dedication in making this possible. Rest assured I will do everything in my power to ensure a successful mission, and ensure that we all return to friends and family, having made history." David didn't wait for any responses. He took a breath and said in his best command voice, "Okay, let's make it look good for the press, folks. Stand by on the sensors, Dr. Kernahan, Dr. Allenby." Both of their indicators went to green on the captain's repeater display. "Very well, Chief. Take us to all ahead 2/3. All ahead 2/3 in 3, 2, 1, fold!" David felt a slight tremor run through the ship, and then a second tremor as the computers automatically cut the gravity drive. "External view ahead." On command, the view ahead of the Marco Polo was projected into the main display holocube to the front of the bridge. He let out the breath he hadn't realized he had been holding. "Okay, people. We're here." Under his breath, he said, "Wherever here is." "Commander, position fix, computer and manual, if you please. Chief, rotate ship and bring us to a dead stop. Dr. Kernahan, Dr. Allenby, full sweep all sensors, but passive only. No need to let anyone know that we're out here." The doctors exchanged exasperated glances. "But, Captain," began Walter in protest, his thirst for knowledge outweighing his concern for his own and the ship's safety. "No, Dr. Kernahan. Passive only. Until I personally give orders to the contrary. Is that clear to you both?" David addressed Amanda, too. "Yes, Captain," they announced in resigned unison. David gave a nod and thought scientists could be such children. He operated the internal communications system and barked at his engineer. "Lieutenant, are you still with us down there? And more importantly, how are my engines?" "Give me a few minutes to do a complete system check, sir." Glendinnings's reply was tinny and a little muffled. "Very well. Report to the chief on completion." "Aye, aye, sir." David looked across at his chief, knowing that she would double-check all Glendinnings's results, not because she didn't trust him. But the old adage of 2 heads are better than 1 was one that David held to, especially when you were 2.5 light-years from home. "Commander, thoughts?" asked David of his XO. Roger looked up from his console and said deadpan, "Sir, so far we have successfully carried out Phase 1 of the mission. We're still alive." David smirked. "And Phase 2? Navigation computer puts us within the margin of error for the fold transit. Sensors report no contacts within passive range, and engineering shows a green board." The news satisfied David as Roger continued. "All data has been downloaded to the courier drone, as per standing operating procedure. and the drone is ready for launch. Roger referred to the courier drone. Despite the huge scientific leap in technology borne out by the capabilities of the Marco Polo, still the most efficient means of communicating over these vast distances was by courier drone. A courier drone was fitted with an individual gravity drive and traveled from the ship's current location through fold space before docking back in the Sol system. Its aim was to bear news of the Marco Polo's location and status of the crew and ship, and it allowed for the manual downloading of all data gathered during their mission. An effective system, a bit like a carrier pigeon, really. As long as you had drones, you still had communications. Thankfully, Marco Polo carried the standard 20. Very well, Commander. Launch the drone and plot our next fold. I want to arrive at least 10 AUs outside the Proxima Centauri system. David planned to exit fold space some 1,490,597,871 kilometers from the edge of the system, close enough that the passive systems of the Marco Polo could scan the whole system, and far enough away that hopefully the Marco Polo would get sufficient warning of any danger. Understood, sir. Calculation running. Stand by. Ready, sir. David turned to Susan. Ready, Chief? Ready, Captain. Very well. Rotate ship to... David glanced at the navigation repeater in front of him. 315.7 degrees by -0.7 degrees galactic and ahead 2/3. 315.7 degrees by -0.7 degrees galactic and ahead 2/3, aye aye, repeated Susan. Rotation complete, and 3, 2, 1, fold. This time the slight tremor went virtually unnoticed. Then the main display holocube showed him a dim red dwarf star, Proxima Centauri. David reflected on the importance of this maneuver. They had done it. The first humans to visit another star. Damn, he felt good. Back to business. Same again, people. Confirm location, sensors on passive only, and bring us to a dead stop relative to the system primary. A chorus of aye aye, sirs, greeted David, and he began to relax as he watched his people go about their business. Suddenly he realized he was hungry. A small snack wouldn't go amiss. After all, he had traveled a long way, he thought, with a wry smile. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught one of his scientists frowning at his sensor suite, punching new commands in as quickly as results were being displayed. Problem, Dr. Kernahan? I'm not sure, Captain. I'm getting some strange readings here. David sat bolt upright in his chair. Explain strange now. David felt an uneasiness creep over him. A bad feeling. Unbidden, he could see his XO downloading the ship's logs into a courier drone and readying it for launch. Walter was still querying his computer. In his best command tone, David said, Now, Doctor! Walter was shaking his head slowly. Well, I'm seeing what looks like He grappled for a word to describe the abnormal readings he could not believe he was seeing. A power source, he finally settled on. Walter looked up from his panel and directed his next words straight to David. It's from one of the inner planets, Captain, but it's no natural source. It must be machine-generated. Without a second thought, David began to recite the ritual he had practiced long and hard so as to be of second nature. A ritual he had so hoped he would never have to complete. Computer, Alpha X-ray 642 initiate. A pause, then a flat, emotionless reply. Voice print confirmed, Captain Catney. On your authority, Alpha X-ray 642 has been activated. Courier drone launched. Bio readings indicate that Lieutenant Commander Cromie is alive and unharmed. Does he concur? The two civilians were looking at the captain in stunned silence. What was happening? Why was he communicating directly with the ship's computer? What was this gibberish? Computer, said the XO. Bravo Yankee 531. I concur. Amanda had been virtually silent until this point, but now her face was flushing red with frustration and anger at the...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?